Today we're going to be talking about the Great Depression continued. FDR and the New Deal. The public were tired of Hoover's policies, so they voted for FDR in 1932. FDR believed that the government should do everything in its power to help people get out of economic hardship. That differed from Hoover's idea that by mainly supporting businesses, the profits would actually trickle down to the public. FDR wanted to directly help the public by giving them government jobs and federal paychecks. So he set out a plan or a program called the New Deal, and it was a set of government programs to aid the U.S. economy. FDR aligned himself with the past progressive presidents such as Roosevelt and Wilson. FDR had three main goals, and I like to call it the triple R, which is relief, recovery, and reform. So first, relief. Relief of human suffering. Here's an overview. During FDR's first 100 days, more important laws were enacted than all of the 20s. A Democratic Congress gave FDR almost everything he wanted, and legislation during the first 100 days had dramatic and long-lasting effects on the country. In 1933, FDR announced a bank holiday coupled with the Emergency Banking Act. This allowed for the opening of sound banks, and public faith in banks would soon be restored. In 1933, the Public Works Administration provided relief by using federal money to pay for major construction projects. In 1933 again, the Civilian Conservation Corps provided relief for young unemployed men between the ages of 18 and 25 by giving them jobs to help with the conservation projects. And we have the Work Progress Administration, which gave jobs to the unemployed to build parks, roads, and other public infrastructure. But only one member of the family could cash in a government job, so women usually didn't work that often. And in 1938, the Federal Emergency Relief Act created the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, which provided direct relief to the unemployed by giving federal money to states, and the money provided to states was put towards creating new jobs. Now on to recovery, specifically recovery of the U.S. economy. In 1933, we have the National Recovery Administration, which provided for the recovery of businesses by encouraging leaders of business and labor to draw up codes for fair practices. The codes included maximum work hours, minimum wage, and how many goods were produced and at what price. These codes were designed to help businesses control production and raise prices while also helping the labor force out by raising wages and creating better working conditions. In 1933, we also have the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which helped people avoid foreclosure by providing them low interest and long-term fixed mortgage rates. In 1933, we also have the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which provided for the recovery of agriculture by paying farmers to take land out of production as a means of limiting production and increasing farm prices. The money provided to farmers came from a tax on industries that turned the raw goods into finished products. And finally, in 1934, the HOLC was followed by the Federal Housing Administration, which insured loans made by banks for housing construction/repairs and lowered the required down payment for buying homes. And then finally, we have reform. In 1933, we have the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which gave government backing and insurance for bank deposits so that depositors would not risk the loss of money. And remember, they lost a lot of money when banks went bankrupt. We also have the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was created to help Tennessee rise from poverty. The region was often flooded and had no electrical power, but the TVA built dams, provided jobs, and brought electrical power to many farms. 1934, we have the Securities and Exchange Commission, which reformed the stock market by regulating pricing practices and requiring data on stocks and bonds offered for sale to the public, and a major goal for them was to curb margin buying and speculation. 1935, we have the Wagner Act, which launched a new era for labor unions and gave the right to all workers to join a labor union of their choice. 1938, we have the Fair Labor Standard Act, which set the minimum wage and maximum hours for worker industries in interstate commerce and prohibited children under 16 to work in these jobs. Unions actually started to grow so powerful that they fought amongst themselves. An example is John Lewis breaking off from the American Federation of Labor, which was the biggest union at that time, and he actually started his own union called the Congress of Industrial Organization. The CIO carried out many successful strikes that increased the power of laborers. Opposition to the New Deal. Here's an overview. Roosevelt was controversial and popular at the same time. Many business leaders and conservatives in both parties criticized the New Deal programs as they thought that it undermined free enterprise. They like to call it creeping socialism. Many were desperate in the 30s, so that meant that people wanted more radical reforms than the ones in the New Deal. This was mostly the socialists and communists. Here's some examples of people who oppose the New Deal. We have, I'm not sure how to say his name. I'm gonna guess Hui Long. He wanted the rich to share their wealth, so he created the Share Our Wealth program in Louisiana. Each family was guaranteed an income of $2,500, which was funded by taxing big corporations. He was unfortunately assassinated in 1935. Definitely not shady. Definitely not saying a big corporation got him assassinated. And you have Father Coughlin, who attacked the New Deal, but like he was super anti-Semitic. We have Dr. Townsend. So we have him being a forerunner of Social Security, and he wanted $200, which is a lot, to be paid each month to unemployed citizens over 60. Finally, we have Alfred E. Smith, who originally supported FDR but then turned on him and the New Deal. Constitutional issues with the New Deal. Here's an overview. The New Deal was challenged by those who thought that the federal government assumed too much power. The Supreme Court and the NRA, which is the National Recovery Administration, a company that was in the chicken raising industry, complained to the Supreme Court that the codes created from the NRA gave legislative powers to the executive branch. The Supreme Court actually agreed that the codes were too similar to laws, so the act that created the NRA was found unconstitutional in 1933. We have the Supreme Court and the Agricultural Adjustment Act. The Supreme Court ruled against a special processing tax that helped farmers, but Congress passed a new version of the law that gave farmers federal payment instead, and they helped stabilize farm prices by storing surplus products until they were needed. The election of 1936. Here's background. FDR fundamentally changed the Democratic Party. Instead of relying on Southerners, they now had the support of many liberal Northerners and Westerners, as FDR's New Deal had positively impacted their lives. Democrats, with the support of the North and West, won control of the presidency and Congress. Roosevelt was pragmatic. He reduced government spending because he thought that inflation was about to rise, but once unemployment started to creep back up, he reversed his decision. Roosevelt had a hard time with Republican justices in the Supreme Court, so he tried to create a law that would increase the number of justices from 9 to 15. But that plan was shot down by literally everybody, even people from his own party. People said that he was trying to undo the system of checks and balances. The New Deal and women/minorities. Individual women in the 30s achieved high position/fame. An example is Amelia Earhart and Frances Perkins, who was the first woman cabinet member. Here's an overview. For the first time since Lincoln, African Americans had the support of the president. Many New Deal programs gave African American jobs, and Roosevelt added a fully black cabinet into the White House. Eleanor Roosevelt also spoke out heavily against racial discrimination. Many African Americans became loyal Democrats due to Roosevelt's support. However, many African Americans still face discrimination despite the president's support. Even within New Deal programs, African Americans face a lot of racial discrimination. In 1934, the Indian Reorganization Act was established, and it gave the U.S. government, it was where the U.S. government began to stress for tribal customs and other parts of Native American culture to be preserved. Even so, many Native Americans were still extremely poor, especially during the Great Depression. Finally, we have the culture of the Depression. Overview. Artists and writers were inspired by the Great Depression to depict the lives of ordinary people struggling with hardship. For literature and music, we have William Faulkner and Lillian Hellman, who portrayed tensions in Southern society. We have John Steinbeck. He depicted the hardship during the Great Depression through his novel The Grapes of Wrath. The music of the 30s was swing instead of jazz, which is popular in the 20s. And the movie industry actually boomed in the Great Depression. Many found that the movies at this time period was like an escape from reality, and this is actually considered the golden age of Hollywood. And finally, comic books also became a popular form of entertainment.